Can I welcome members, officers and the cabinet member to the Children and Young People's Scrutiny Committee. Can I also welcome any members of the public and the press and remind them that this is a meeting held in public. It's not a public meeting and there are not opportunities on this occasion to take questions or comments from the gallery. I think it would be useful to introduce ourselves to everyone. I know we've got new people on board, so I'll introduce myself. I'm Councillor Angela McClements and I'm Chair of the Children and Young People Scrutiny Committee. And Mark, if you could introduce yourself.
I'm Councillor Mark Boylan. I'm the ward member for Ketley and Overdale, and I'm also a member of the committee tonight.
Yeah, I'm just going through my list and it's Jo next.
Hello, good evening everybody. My name's Jo Britton. I'm the Executive Director for Children's Services here in Telford and Wrekin.
Adele.
Good evening, I'm Adele Ellis and I'm Director of Safeguarding and Family Support for Telford and Wrekin.
Welcome Adele.
Thank you.
Met, I understand
it is.
Joined us early November time. So.
That's right, yeah, first week in November, so week 7.
Yeah, so thanks very much for coming along anyway.
Thank you.
Ian?
Councillor Ian Fletcher, Councillor for Priorsley, member of the Scrutiny Committee.
Thank you. Jane?
Hi, I'm Councillor Jane Greenaway and I'm a member of the committee.
Janice?
Councillor Janice Jones, Madeley and Sutton Hill member, and I'm part of this committee.
Thanks, Janice. Darren?
Hello, good evening everyone. I'm Darren Nibbs. I'm the Strategic Lead for Children's Services at Telford and Wrekin Council.
Thank you. Anthea?
Hello, good evening. My name is Anthea Lowe. I'm the Associate Director for Policy and Governance, and I'm here as Legal Advisor to the committee this evening.
Shirley?
Good evening. I'm Councillor Shirley Reynolds. I'm the Cabinet Member for Children, Young People, Education and Lifelong Learning.
Kieran? Karen?
Good evening, I'm Councillor Karen Tomlinson and a member of the CYP committee this evening.
Simon?
Simon Wellman and I'm Director for Education and Skills. Hi everybody.
Hi. And Stacey?
I'm Stacey Worthington. I'm the Senior Democratic and Scrutiny Services Officer from Telford and Wrekin.
Okay, lovely. Thanks everyone for that. I think it's just useful for everyone to know who's part of the committee and who the officers are this evening. If we look at, move on to item 1, which is apologies for absence. So far I've received apologies from Hilda Rhodes and I just wondered if there were any other apologies received.
No apologies, Chair, other than Councillor Rhodes.
Okay. Thanks, Anthea. Item number 2 is declarations of interest, and just ask the members if they've got any interest to declare. No, that's lovely. Right, moving on to item 3, which is the minutes of the last meeting, which you will all have had in your pack. Looking at the last minutes, they were dated the 3rd of September, 30th of September. Just wondered if we could approve those as a correct record, if I could have a proposer and a seconder.
I'll propose, Angela.
Thank you. And a seconder?
I'll second.
Right, everyone in agreement, if you can just put your hand up, show of hands. Thank you. I think everyone's in agreement. If you can raise your hand electronically, I think I've noticed all hands up. In the future, if you can put your hands up electronically. Item number 4 is a report on the COVID-19 update. So I'd like to invite yourself, Simon, to make a presentation. for the benefit of the committee members, you may want to clarify how the presenters would prefer to receive the questions, whether as you go along in the presentation or at the end. Which would you prefer, Simon?
If I could have questions at the end, that would be great. I'll share the presentation first and then take them at the end. Okay. If you just bear with me 1 second, I'll bring it up on the screen. Thank you. Okay, can you see that?
Yeah, we can see the screen. I don't know if it could be made any bigger, but obviously we can see this, the first one. Yeah. Everyone else okay with?
Is that better?
Yeah, I think that's better. Yeah.
Okay. Okay, so yes, I'm going to just provide an update in terms of the response of the education community to the COVID-19. And essentially this would include the response across early years providers, schools and post-16 settings. And effectively we have got it in two parts because there was a clear phase between March and September of this year, and then there's been a different phase, if you like, from September to the present day. So throughout, though, in terms of our response, we've had key priorities throughout, and those key priorities have focused on the protection and support for our most vulnerable. It's really focused on attendance initially during the March and September phase, when schools were partially open to key workers and vulnerable children. And then it's been a huge focus of attention, as you would imagine, since September, when all schools were expected to reopen. Our other key priority has definitely been around emotional wellbeing of pupils, making sure as well that our staff are emotionally well to make sure that we continue. We've focused on the recovery curriculum. Clearly, periods of time outside of school and early years providers and post-16s had a significant consequence, and therefore we've had to make sure that we put in catch-up. Clearly, we've had to respond and support the track and trace initiative, and that's become extremely apparent since September, and in terms of the management of COVID-19 within our schools. And then the development of the remote learning offer has had to progress significantly quickly, particularly at the beginning in March when schools did close. So what we had in March and September is we whilst schools were only partially open, as I was explaining, partially open to key workers and partially opened to vulnerable children, we did have very good levels of attendance of the cohorts that we wanted to be in. And in comparison, when we were looking, we were in the top quartile of the pupils that were in at that time. As we progressed through the term, the DfE then issued further guidance in terms of year groups that needed to come back, and they started to come back in June after May half term. And all schools in Telford and Wrekin opened up and followed that guidance in terms of the year groups in a phased approach to make sure that those priority years were in. What we did is we had to make sure that we had a significant focus on our vulnerable learners, and for every child with an education, health and care plan, we completed risk assessments, we made phone calls, personalised phone calls to families, we did follow-up calls to schools to make sure that reasonable endeavours were being completed, we did briefings, we made sure that we linked very, very closely across children's social care, so that we could identify those on child protection plans, children in need, children in care and other vulnerable learners. And we had really, really good crossover with social care and health at that time. And we wanted to make sure that we were engaging in the views of children and young people whilst they weren't at school, in order to make sure that we were prepared in September when we did reopen. In terms of remote learning, you won't be surprised to hear that the response needed to be immediate and it needed to be rapid back in March, and that developed as the months progressed. There was a lot of information that came all at once in terms of the national picture, and there was a lot of need in order to make sure that learning was taking place while schools were closed. We undertook lots of surveys with schools to make sure that we could get a feel of what was going on, and most were delivering a core curriculum. Most were trying to focus on maths, English, and making sure that the basics were in place. New resources became available. So, for example, the Oak Academy was a national resource, and many of our schools dipped into that. And also during the initial phase, that March to September phase, we did have Ofsted inspectors seconded to the authority in order to produce good practice guides for remote learning as schools became more and more on board. Schools were very, very keen to contact pupils as well who did not appear to be engaging, and that was done as a matter of routine. Clearly, there have been areas that we've needed to focus on in terms of gaps and in terms of that remote learning offer, and you might not be surprised to hear that some of the barriers often include access to IT. Clearly, families are going to be in very, very different positions, and therefore we had to think about how we were going to enable access, particularly if we were having an IT-based remote learning offer. What I would say is that the expectation is that whilst remote learning needs to happen, it can happen using a variety of formats, IT being just one of them. But clearly, where we have got online learning, there was issues around access to Wi-Fi. There was issues around access to technology. So while some families might have laptops, they might not have enough laptops for each child, or they might not have any laptops at all. We also have issues around working spaces, around language barriers, and what schools told us that they were doing at that time is loaning out equipment. They're trying to provide non-IT activities as well. They're trying to set learning challenges and top tips, and lots of newsletters went out. They were also trying to make sure, and we were trying to make sure we use our bilingual staff to support AL parents and children. Now, in order to support IT access, clearly there were schemes that were happening nationally. There was a national scheme regarding laptops for the vulnerable learners, and then we also had a council-run scheme because the sufficiency in terms of the national scheme needed to be topped up. And then since September, there's been a further extension of laptops for schools, and I'll talk about that in a bit. In terms of our contacts, it was absolutely crucial that we gave clear communication to our educational sector so they understood what the position was, and as you can imagine, that was changing on a daily basis. Guidance was coming thick and fast, guidance was changing thick and fast, so we kept touch, and we kept touch really on a daily basis around what was happening. We had weekly meetings in terms of the Telford Education Strategic Partnership Board. We met with our primary heads executive, our trade unions, just to make sure that everyone was clear about what was happening. And we also had weekly meetings with the Department for Education in order to raise concerns and just share our success stories. And clearly, due to the Ofsted being seconded, we had a clear link there as well. In terms of summer activities, there were activities that were put on after the guidance was issued that was okay. And for example, the holiday activity Eat Well scheme supported many families. We also had reading challenges. We offered RTHOG outreach as well at that time. So since September, clearly the situation changed where all pupils were then expected to return to school, and as you can imagine, leading up to September there was significant work in terms of communication to the wider community around schools reopening and really around promoting attendance. We also had significant support from the health and safety colleagues around developing risk assessments and making sure that protective measures were put in place as required. We recognise that since September there have been periods where children have had to self-isolate, so that continued need to develop our remote learning offer has continued. We had a significant amount of work in terms of transport arrangements, and our transport arrangements were extended so that because we know we needed additional capacity in order to manage the bubbles that were being suggested in guidance. We did get a grant in order to support additional capacity, but we also worked really, really closely with parents around their support for taking children where they were eligible for travel assistance, and that scheme has worked really, really well. We've also implemented the Education Notice Board, and the Education Notice Board is really our vehicle now through which we communicate with educational settings around what's happening, and they've really, really appreciated the clarity that has brought. So again, probably not surprising, but the amount of support that our schools and early years providers and post-16 settings are given to the track and trace process has been immense, and clearly schools have had to respond on a daily basis to what is happening in terms of positive cases. There is that expectation, that's a national expectation, that all settings help track and trace, and that has meant that our senior leaders in settings have had to engage very closely with their communities where a positive case has been identified. There's a very successful and positive relationship between the education and community and our local health protection hub, which is local authority based. The support, advice and guidance that's provided by the health protection hub has been very welcomed by schools, and they have really been able to identify quickly who the direct contacts are where there's a positive case, and how many children need to self-isolate, what the self-isolation dates are, and what the rules of engagement are around that. And that's worked really well. And settings have, as I say, been guided to determine and know exactly what those next steps are, and they've also appreciated the out of hours support that's been on offer from the Health Protection Hub and education team. We have created lots of resources for settings as well to make sure that they understand what the next steps are, given a number of different scenarios that might happen. What happens if you have one positive case? What happens if you have two positive cases, etc., etc. We did a lot of work at the beginning around symptoms, around understanding which symptoms would lead to a family to need a test. Clearly that has changed as the situation has moved on over different months, but again, people found that clarity helpful, and we've updated lots of frequently asked questions around how we manage COVID-19 within education. What we've also really tried to do and engage with is supportive communication, and again, we wanted to focus on what has been working well. So for example, when we came back, we did a video looking at children and their experiences of being back to school, and really that provided us with lots of positive messages about children really being pleased to be back at school, and I know staff found that really engaging. We've also done some communication around staying safe at the school gates. So that's where we have worked on videos showing particular steps and advice and guidance for parents around how we can stay safe at the school gates. So for example, wearing face masks, keeping socially distant, following the rules that have been put in place around entrance and exit to buildings. We developed some transport guidance with children as well, so that we were clear on particularly on the use of face masks in public transport. And then we have also done a thank you to our early years providers, school and colleges, just in terms of the amount of work, the additional work clearly that has been going on over the last term in order to keep our settings open. And really importantly, we've collected pupil views about their well-being through the collection of some rich pictures, and I've got some examples to show you. Okay, so I'm just going to show you one of the videos that we did right at the beginning.
Chairman, we can't hear the video.
Can't hear the video.
No.
Apologies. Oh, thank you. I'm really sorry. The video. Okay. If I can fix that, I will. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to continue and come back to it if there's time. Apologies about that. Okay. Thank you for letting me know as well. Okay, here we have some examples here of some pupil views and the rich picture that we've done in terms of their well-being. And this really has just captured the kind of view that they were anxious about coming back to school, and they were anxious about what it would be like, but actually very quickly when they have returned, they found that it's been a really, really positive experience. And we've got views, as you can see here, from Church Aston, and we've got some from Melbourne Primary School as well. We've been into secondary, we've been into special, we've been to post 16, and all really have shown a common theme, which is that they have really appreciated being back at school, really worried initially about some of the new rules, but very quickly just got on with teaching and learning. Okay, so in terms of some of our key successes, we had minimal school closures since the beginning of September. We have had some occasions where a school has had to close, but in terms of the overall numbers have been very, very low. We have had partial closures all the way throughout, but full school closures have been minimal. We do have lots of evidence of the educational community going above and beyond to support welfare of children and young people. So this is outside of teaching and learning. This is outside of, if you like, normal education core offer. This is about supporting community food banks. This is about supporting children wearing uniforms. This is about going that extra mile. We've had lots of schools engaging in a creative curriculum as well, because the focus on pupil wellbeing has been really, really important. We've been shortlisted for some awards, national awards in terms of Future in Mind, so that's around pupil health and wellbeing. We implemented the Wellbeing for Education Return, which was recognised by the DfE as being good practice, and that was a particular grant and particular project to support that transition in September. And services within education and skills have definitely recovered well. We kept up a virtual presence, as you can imagine, over the last few months, and in terms of business as normal, that has been picked up pretty quickly. In terms of recovery curriculum, we have now received our catch-up funding for the autumn term. That's all been distributed out to schools, and schools are using that in order to, as we say, identify gaps and identify the supports needed. We've had Ofsted undertaking assurance visits in 7 of Telford and Wrekin schools, and again, those assurance visits really have all focused on what has it been like in terms of schools reopening, what's attendance like, and again, comments have been very positive around the approach. And then in terms of remote learning, whilst remote learning has had that rapid progression, the legal duty came into effect on the 22nd of October, and now there's expectation that all schools are providing remote learning where children need to self-isolate. And then developments over the last term, where there's been multiple updates to national guidance. We've had the National Laptops for Learners scheme, which was extended in September. So more laptops were going out to schools where they needed to be self-isolated. Unfortunately, there was a reduction in allocation. However, that reduction now seems to have been overcome. And so we've got that recovery of the initial allocation that was given to us, and we're expecting those next term. We've also had the Winter COVID grant, so that is about our families under certain criteria, for example, free school meals, who are accessing additional support at Christmas. And then end of term arrangements, we've had discussions around those, around the proposed inset day on the 18th, where some settings are and some aren't. And of course, we've had the very recent announcement yesterday around rapid testing in schools, and we're just trying to understand the detail around that announcement too. So the closing comments really are that we've had really strong communication in Telford and Wrekin with our education settings, so we're clear about what the expectation is over the last few months. We've got really personalised relationships, so schools and settings will say to us, we know where to come for information, we know where to come for support when we need to. As I've explained, lots of examples of education community going above and beyond. I think we've had a quick response to presenting issues, and there have been a number of issues that we've had to think about and work through. And really, you know, during this unprecedented period, our children, our parents, and all of our colleagues who work in the education sector really have been magnificent. It has really been a very challenging time, and I think the fact that our schools and settings have remained fully open for the majority of the time since September is absolutely amazing. Okay, I'm going to come out of here now and take questions. Oh, Angela,
Chair,
sorry.
Chair, you're on mute.
Apologies. Yeah, thank you, Simon, for that excellent presentation. We really valued it. I think it was really, really good, and give us an overview of what was happening. And I just can't imagine the workload on teachers. I know my daughter's a teacher, so I did get some sort of feedback, you know, on the workload.
Yeah.
And like you say, it has been unprecedented times, you know, for teachers, but right across the educational spectrum, really. So a big thank you for everything that you've done as a council, because I think clearly the communication has been really good. That's the feedback that I've had as a councillor, and that's right across the spectrum, right across all services, really, that Telford and Wrekin's communication has been good. And I think that's just really crucial in these times, you know, because people are just, you know, very worried, very concerned about, you know, what's happening, you know, what the future is for the children, and also, you know, having to do remote learning, you know, another pressure for teachers. But I'll move on to sort of those people that members that want to ask questions. And Karen, you've got your hand up. Would you like to?
Thank you, Chair. Initially, I just wanted to say what a great success it's been. I know I've got friends and friends' children nowadays. We have to say that as we get older, who are in the teaching environment, and how difficult it has been for them. And I'd just like to say what a great success having the TES award as well. So, you know, I'd like to say, you know, I think the team has worked extremely well in these difficult circumstances. I think my concern would be now regarding lobbying the government because of the exam situation, because I'm notified about when schools can't, you know, certain year groups can't be in attendance, and also friends who work at other schools. For instance, some years have gone to school, they have to isolate for 2 weeks, go back, someone else has got infected, back at home again for another 2 weeks. It's disrupting senior school children's life so much. I just can't see how they're going to be able to catch up with the curriculum. So I'm not really sure whether I should be sort of saying this within this situation, but it does concern me greatly. And it also concerns friends of mine who teach A-level and also GCSE students, that they are really worried that the students will just not be able to catch up, and they are concerned about what's going to happen. Thank you.
And in response, I would say that currently we are following the national guidance around what the expectations are. I think I would also say that we recognise the challenge that you have presented, and where there is opportunity for us to make representation with the DFE, we do highlight that challenge that you have presented. Yeah.
Right. So are there any more questions that members want to ask? First, I just want to ask one about, obviously, the vulnerable learners, you know, with the remote learning, you know, in particular those with language barriers as well, and how has that gone, you know, because obviously they've got to have, there's catch up there, isn't there, for those.
Yeah.
And also, you know, the, I suppose the access to IT as well, which is a worry for our most vulnerable groups. So I just wondered what the council is doing in terms of catch up to support those vulnerable groups, and especially those with language barriers as well.
So in terms of remote learning, as I explained, that has really been on a rapid progression over the last few months. There is now that legal expectation that it happens in terms of when children do self-isolate. And I think, you know, the vulnerable groups were exceptionally mindful of how remote learning is differentiated for those, what additional support would be needed for children who have English as an additional language, for example. And actually our multicultural development team have focused very, very hard on producing guidance and information around what schools need to do to, as I say, think about that and make sure that it's targeted appropriately. IT access is definitely still something that we are working on, and it that won't be unique to Telford. That will be a national issue as well. We recognise that access to IT across the board needs to develop if we're going to have an expectation of online learning. But let me just be clear, that expectation around remote learning is that we need to offer a variety of practice, because one size won't fit all. We've got different needs, we've got different ages, we've got different issues. So we need to make sure that there is non-IT access as well. I would say confidently that the approach in schools is definitely getting better. And there's workshops and capacity building activity going on all the time to make sure that we can get our remote learning as robust as we can.
Yeah, thank you, Simon. I know it's been a sort of big learning curve for everyone, hasn't it?
Sure,
and you've been learning as you go along, understand that. Thank you. Jane, you wanted to ask a question?
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. It's following on from your point, actually, Angela, that the AHCP children that you spoke about earlier on, 1,600 plus, it's quite a large number. And if they weren't engaging at that time, even children who don't have problems that may have missed out early on because of, I don't know, IT problems or whatever, or lack of resources to do it. How many were engaging because they've got obviously extra actually work to put in to get themselves back to square one where they would be.
Yeah.
I'm just wondering what the numbers were with the engagement early on.
So in terms of the education, health and care children, what happened there was that there was a legal duty that was put in place around reasonable endeavours, and that meant that whilst there was an understanding that not everything in a child's education, health and care plan could be carried out, something must be put in place. And so what schools needed to do at that time was to put a plan in place with parents around what that would look like. Now, lots of that wasn't IT based because it wasn't appropriate because of the children's needs. What I would say is our special schools worked absolutely tirelessly with our families where they were in special school to make sure that there was appropriate access to some kind of learning. And I would say that the communication with parents at that time was really, really strong. Clearly, there will be a knock in terms of gaps, and that is something that has been picked up very quickly in schools, and it's still working on. So all schools have got catch-up funding. In mainstream, £85 a head. In special, it's just over 200. So they have got additional funding in order to, as I say, focus on that catch-up, and that is going to take some time. Yeah.
Thanks for that. Thanks for that, Simon.
Thank you, Simon. Are there any other questions anyone wants to discuss? No? Well, thank you again, Simon. For that report.
Apologies about the video. I will send that around separately because it is a really nice video.
It looked nice. Yeah, it looked good. Yeah, no problem. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Okay,
then we'll move on to item 5, which is the family safeguarding model. And we'll be looking at the Hertfordshire model. We're having a briefing on that, and I think Joe, you're kindly going to present it, and I'm not sure if you'll be handing over to Darren and Adele as well, or whether you're presenting the whole lot. I'm not quite sure, but just do you want questions as we go along, or questions after, like Simon had? What would you prefer?
Okay, thank you, Chair. Darren will be taking us through a presentation as a strategic lead for family safeguarding, but I'm really keen to share with Scrutiny this evening that model of practice, and he'll take us through that and perhaps take questions at the end, if that's okay, Chair.
Yeah, that's fine. Everyone okay with that? Okay, Darren.
Thank you, Joe. Thank you, Chair. Bear with me just a few moments while I share the presentation. Can you see the presentation, Chair?
Yeah, we can. Don't know if you can make it. That's it. Yeah, smashing.
Is that okay?
Yeah.
Thank you. So the intention of the presentation this evening is to give you, to give Scrutiny an overview of our implementation of the family safeguarding model in Telford and Wrekin. start by saying that as an authority, we are delighted to have been successful in our application to the DFE to become an Adopt a Local Authority, and that sees us partnering with Hertfordshire County Council to implement the family safeguarding model. I think it's fair to say that by implementing this model, it's our intention that we will be building on our foundation of excellent practice, and Scrutiny will be aware of the current state of our practice as a result of our Ofsted rating earlier this year. And this model further develops our practice and most importantly our commitment to achieving the best possible outcomes for children and young people in the borough. So just provide some background in terms of the model. As I've said, it's funded by the DFE and it's a partnership approach between local authorities, Adopt a Local Authorities, and the model that was developed in Hertfordshire. Currently, we are anticipating that the model will go live in Telford and Wrekin in May 2021, and that's subject to ongoing confirmation with the DFE. It's important to point out that this model is externally evaluated and rigorously evaluated by the What Works Centre, who were appointed by the DFE to undertake the evaluation of the model. The overarching aim of the model is to ensure children's safety at home by supporting families and parents wherever possible. And again, I reiterate that this builds on our existing practices. Everything we do in children's social care is focused on supporting children to remain within their birth family wherever that is possible, because we know that that is the best way to achieve the best possible outcomes for our children. The family safeguarding model is offered where substance abuse, mental health and or domestic abuse are factors that are impacting upon the adults and the children within that family, and where at least one child is under the age of 12. I think it's important to point out that for our partners, so for our colleagues in schools, the police, school nurses and the health services, they will notice no difference in terms of the referral process, and that will still be via Family Connect, our first point of contact. Eligible families will be identified following our statutory child and family assessment, and at that point they will then go forward to be supported via the family safeguarding model. So what is the model? It's important to point out that family safeguarding is a whole system reform of child protection practice, and it's really looking at how we can support parents to make changes that we know will then have the best possible outcomes for their children. So it brings together a multidisciplinary team. Currently, the model, we work as part of almost virtual multidisciplinary teams. So the children's social worker, if there's a need identified for example, mental health support for parents, we would make that referral to mental health services and then have ongoing conversations in terms of how parents are being supported via that service. With the family safeguarding model, those specialist adult practitioners are co-located with our children's social workers and become part of a real life team and are, as I said, co-located and based together within our existing social work teams. There are changes that will be introduced in terms of how we record the work that we do with children and families via the electronic workbook, and that allows all of the adult practitioners to record directly into the child's electronic file. So all practitioners supporting that family within the local authority are able to see on an ongoing basis the progress of that family and progress of that child. Another very important aspect of the model is the group case supervision. And what that sees is all practitioners, the children's social worker, the adult mental health practitioner, substance misuse practitioner or domestic abuse practitioners being supervised on a monthly basis in real time. So rather than those practitioners being supervised within their own authorities and their own area of specialisms, they can come together as a group, review progress collectively and holistically, discuss the outcomes and agree next steps. I think what is also important in terms of that monthly supervision is that the range of practitioners present can respectfully challenge each other. So if there are differing views, you can challenge each other in terms of how people have come to that view, and that gives a very good, much richer and much more holistic understanding of the progress or lack of progress in respect of that family and those children, and then leads to really in-depth conversations about what we need to be doing next. The way that the social worker will work to support children and their families will look different through this model. There's an 8-module intervention programme which really guides the work that our social workers will be doing with children and their families, and has a very, very strong focus on direct work with children to really understand their experience, and then look at how, by supporting their parents, how we can really make that difference in terms of their lived experience. And all of this is underpinned by motivational interviewing. So in the new year, we'll be moving forward with a training programme that will see all of our practitioners, the children's social workers and the adult practitioners trained in motivational interviewing, which is a strengths-based restorative approach that enables us to work alongside and to support parents to understand some of the challenges and for them to identify what changes they feel they need to make a difference to their own lives, but also to the lives of their children. Just an overview in terms of the role of the adult practitioners. So as I've said, we'll have adult mental health practitioners, and they will be able to provide timely and ongoing mental health risk assessments and needs assessments for parents who are supported via the family safeguarding model. I think that is really, really beneficial, because what we'll then get is a much richer understanding of the impact of mental health difficulties on the adult, on the parents, and also then the impact of that in terms of their care of their children. And because we'll have that much richer, more in-depth risk assessment, we'll be there, therefore we'll be able to make sure that the support plan really tailors those areas of need. Those practitioners will also be able to support parents to engage with specialist mental health services. So we know sometimes adults who have mental health difficulties find it difficult to engage in support services. So working with us through the family safeguarding model and building those relationships and being supported with conditions such as anxiety or low mood and depression, eventually they'll build that relationship and be able to go on to specialist mental health services. The adult mental health practitioners will also provide consultation to wider social work teams and other adult workers that form part of the family safeguarding model. Alongside that, we'll also have a clinical psychologist, so they'll be able to undertake psychological assessment and formulation, working directly with parents, and they will then be able to offer a level of therapeutic intervention to support parents. Alongside that, we have the domestic abuse officers, and again, they will work either on a one-to-one or a group setting situation to really understand the impact of domestic abuse for the adults in that relationship, and also for the children, and look at how we can put a safe plan in place to ensure that members of the family are protected from harm. They will look at how they support adults to make changes, to look at how they can develop safer relationships. Alongside that, we will also have domestic abuse support workers who will support children and the victim, either the female victim or the male victim, to ensure that all people that are impacted by domestic abuse or that are perpetrating domestic abuse are supported to make those changes. And then finally, as part of the model, we have substance misuse workers. And again, they can work on a one-to-one or group work basis to support parents through the recovery programme. Again, from a risk assessment and identification of needs perspective, those workers have a real in-depth understanding of the impact of alcohol misuse and drug misuse on the parents and their ability to care safely for their children. And they will work with the parents and with the child social worker to make those changes to support parents to make a difference. So in terms of the impact of the model, in November of this year, the DfE published the evaluation report focusing on the local authorities that had adopted in the second wave of the family safeguarding model. And what that report concluded was that all 4 adopter authorities were able to replicate the model, which is really, really positive to hear. And those authorities achieved reductions in the number of children under 12 that had to be taken into local authority care as a result of abuse and neglect within their family. So it's a really, really important message there that this model has been evaluated and shown to be successful in reducing the number of children that require accommodation by the local authority. The evaluation also concluded that family safeguarding is highly effective in improving the quality of practice, the experience of children and families, and also the satisfaction of staff working within the model. So it's a model that all people involved, children, families, and those workers that work within the model, feel has a real benefit in terms of how they practice, but most importantly, it has a real benefit for children and families that are supported by the model. And the link there is provided just to the full evaluation report. So where are we? What's our progress and next steps in terms of our implementation? So we've established our governance structure, which has the project group, the operational board, and the partnership level. So we're really engaging at all levels of the system to look at how we move forward to develop and to embed this model in Telford and Wrekin. Workstreams are in place and are already progressing the areas of responsibility to make sure that we are able to move forward and to go live with this model. Motivational interviewing and the family safeguarding workshops have been confirmed, and dates will be going out in due course to practitioners. We've established the fortnightly calls with the Hertfordshire project manager, who provides support in terms of ongoing conversations around how we embed the model. And also myself and Adele have regular calls with the programme director and deputy director from Hertfordshire. And as I've said, provisional go live date currently of May 2021. And I'm happy to take questions at this point. I'll just remove this from my screen.
Okay, lovely. Thanks, Darren, for that presentation. Really good. I think it was really useful because obviously we're looking at having some follow-up meetings, I think, from that in mid-2021 and the 12 months following. So, I think it was just a useful presentation as a starter for us as scrutiny members to understand it. I suppose from my perspective, has the impact of COVID had any sort of made any difference to that particular model? Because right across everything, isn't it? Sort of the impact of COVID will have made a difference. If I can just pick up on just some, like on mental health, domestic abuse and substance misuse, those sort of, ones where actually it has, and whether that's taken into account within the model as you move forward.
Yes, so I think members will be aware that locally, regionally and nationally, as a result of COVID, we have seen increases in terms of reports around the prevalence of domestic abuse. And we know from the information that's publicly available that the impact of lockdown and the impact of some of the restrictions around our day-to-day lives is having an impact on the emotional well-being of all members of society. I think what I would say is that the family safeguarding model at its core is very much about supporting children and families where domestic abuse, substance misuse and mental health are evident. So I think given the impact of COVID, I think absolutely this is the right model for us to be bringing into Telford and Wrekin. Yeah. And clearly as part of introducing that model, we are always looking at demand and making sure that we've got demand right and that we've got that people in place that will be able to do what we need them to do to support our children and young people in Telford.
Yeah, lovely, thank you. I've got a few with the hands up. Karen, I think you're next.
Thank you, Chair. You'd actually asked the question I was going to ask. Now, I mean, I think we're all aware that this situation has exacerbated the issues that we have with mental health, with the domestic abuse. So I'm glad the Chair has actually mentioned that, and obviously there's a lot of stress on lots of people within the authority who have to deal with this. I just think it's a great thing that we are going to be more joined up, looking at all areas. That we do have to look after our young people. I have friends who have grown up, who grew up in domestic abuse, alcoholism, and I have to say that as adults they have suffered from PTSD regarding this and having to have counselling. So if we can try and help these young people in their lives so they don't have to go through this, where estranged parents and then remarrying and going back into the same sort of situation, we need to nurture our young people. So I'm just really pleased with this. But thank you, Chair, for stealing my question. But no, I think it's a great scheme. So thanks very much. And I look forward to looking through these throughout the coming year. Thank you.
Yeah. Jane, got your hand up.
I better lower my hand. Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I'm sure some of the older members will remember at some point in the past we were looking at by supporting the children better, you supported the families. So we were talking about parenting. We did a lot around that at one time. I mean, and this is sort of a far broader approach, but fundamental, really. I have had a quick look at what they're doing sort of in depth more. And because you're obviously going to be supporting families, I suppose, in the broader sense of terms, there'll be an added, I suppose, problems by needing more resources for perhaps extra counselling, etc. Within that. So I wondered, obviously that was part of it that I saw when I had a look at the links for the Hertfordshire model. I know we already do the counselling, but I think that's going to be an enhanced service that we'll need. So I look forward to it, actually, because I think it's, fundamentally we need to support children by supporting their families to achieve what we need to achieve for them. Yes, thank you, Chair.
Okay. Janice, you got your hand up.
Yes, thank you, Chair. I'm all for supporting children staying with their families. I'm totally in support of that. My reservations are from experience as a past foster carer for many years, that sometimes we leave these children in this situation for too long and we end up doing more damage to the child than we could have stopped had we made the separation earlier. And that's not something I say lightheartedly at all. I mean, I can think of two very tragic cases where I felt myself the children had been left in that situation for far too long. How are we going to recognise that, and how are we going to identify these issues?
Okay, so what I would say to that is absolutely. It's we do walk a very fine balance between supporting children to remain at home and then taking that very, very difficult decision to bring a child into our care. In terms of this model, I think the way that we navigate that is slightly different to the way that we've done it before. Within the presentation, I made reference to the group supervision. So within the model, we have those adult specialists that will be able to support us from in terms of children's social care to really understand the challenges in terms of domestic abuse, in terms of adult mental health, and in terms of domestic abuse. And through that group supervision, we'll be able to challenge each other and challenge ourselves as a whole system to make sure that we are doing the right thing by children, whether that is to continue to support the family and to support the children to remain at home, or whether we are approaching that point where we need to be considering different options for the children in that setting. And clearly, if we arrive at that point, we would then look at the action that we need to take, whether we can support those children to remain within their wider birth family with aunts and uncles or grandparents. What I would say is that they are difficult decisions that we take. However, we are all absolutely committed to doing the right thing by children and young people. And if that means that children need to come into our care, then we will make sure that we are making the right decision for children in the borough. And we have a whole host of checks and balances as part of our processes through all levels of the organisation to make sure that we are making the right decisions. And our practitioners, our social workers, will continue to receive ongoing support and supervision to make sure that the cases are progressing and that we are continuing to do the right thing by children.
Okay, thank you, Darren. I just wondered, I've got no other hands up, I just wondered if Joe, Shirley or Adele wanted to add anything, or...
Sorry, Chair, I just couldn't get off mute.
Yes, okay.
Apologies for that. No, I just think it's an exciting endeavour. I think we're really, really looking forward to implementing this model of practice in May of next year. I think it's a refreshing approach in terms of children and young people. Really navigating your way around accessing these type of services for adults is often quite problematic or can be time consuming, and straight away from the earliest opportunity we will be able to bring all of those services in to that family network. And so I'm really, really hopeful that we'll see the changes that we want to see for some children that have been struggling. So I'm really, really confident in this approach. I think there's a significant wealth of evidence to reflect the changes that this has created for families, and that's maintained, and that it's safe as it possibly can be. As Darren said, we walk a fine line, and it is all about judgment and professional integrity in that regard as well. But I'm really looking forward to this next year really coming on and moving forward in that way. Thank you, Chair.
Yeah, thanks. I don't know if Adele or Shirley wanted. Adele, did you want to?
Just to add really, and just in response to Councillor Jones' comments there, just an assurance, this model is very much about keeping children safely at home. So there is absolutely that caveat that, safety remains and protection remains the focus. This is a different way of delivering the business, but it is also still about very much the paramount principle of children being kept safe and their interest being at the centre. So just really to try and offer a little bit of reassurance, Chair.
Yeah, thanks, Adele. That's really good. Thank you. Well, I thought that was really useful. And obviously we're looking forward to the rollout of the model, which I think is May. So I think it's going to come back to scrutiny, and we'll have some feedback, which we're looking forward to, really. Thanks very much for that. Okay, on item number 6, it says 8 on my thing here. Item number 6, which is the motion from Councillor Janke. Councillor Janke was hoping to be here this evening, but unfortunately he's got another meeting. So Councillor Karen Tomlinson, who's obviously a member of the Scrutiny Committee, has kindly agreed to give a sort of presentation of that motion. But I just wondered if members have seen the motion, haven't they? It's in the papers, but I just wondered perhaps if we could just have a quick look at it on screen, if that's possible. So just to remind members about what the motion was about.
Chair, I'm hoping that's visible now. I'll make it larger, but can you see? Can you see that the screen is shared?
Yeah.
Yes. Okay. So just bear with me, and I'll make that larger.
Obviously, the motion is about the School Streets Initiative to protect children from air pollution. Everyone see a copy of the motion.
I'll give members a minute just to read that part, and then I'll scroll down to the next part of the motion because it's too large to fit on one screen.
Okay.
I'll keep it on the screen, Chair.
Yeah. Thanks, Anthea. That's really useful, just for those members who perhaps haven't got the papers before them. And just really on that, just need to highlight, obviously, the landmark ruling today, which actually found that air pollution contributed to the death of 9-year-old Ella Kissy Deborah. I just thought I'd need to mention that tonight because I think it was really important. Air pollution does have an impact on children's health. So I think you've all had a look at the motion now. So Karen, if you'd like, I think if you just take the motion off now and Karen to present, if that's okay, Anthea. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Obviously, Thomas is gutted that he can't be here tonight to actually give you this short brief. It's something he feels extremely passionate about, and I'm really pleased that our Chair has mentioned about the fatality of that young girl. You know, it's something that is just awful, and we have to think about pollution and our climate changes, etc. So this is just a short brief, so if you just bear with me that I'm going to read it. He's also given me lots of Q's and A's here, so I hope I'll be able to answer any questions you have, because I've got a little list here. So, right, the basic principle of school streets is to restrict motor traffic at the school gates for a short period of time on the school run, providing a safer environment for pupils and parents, encouraging active travel to school and a model shift out of the car. In addition, they also enable social distancing outside schools due to increased pedestrian capacity and improve the air quality and environment at the school gates. This is done by using measures under the Council's considerable statutory powers, making smart use experimental traffic orders where necessary. The arguments in favour of school streets are overwhelmingly positive. Healthier, more alert children, a demonstrably safer environment on the school runs, and of course less carbon emissions, pollution, filling the lungs of our school children. Prior to successive COVID-19 lockdowns, school street schemes have already been successfully introduced or were being trialled at multiple local authorities across the UK. More recently, Shropshire County Council has introduced school streets across their local authority area. Indeed, the first primary school in Shropshire with a school street scheme enabled just a few weeks ago has been hailed widely in the press as a huge success. In addition, the funding for such a scheme appears to be available, whether it is using some of the 2.6 million recently announced by this council for sustainable active travel, or indeed the very recent announcements by the government of an additional funding tranche of 175 million in helping local authorities push ahead with a new wave of traffic reduction schemes to enable more people to walk and cycle in their areas, including to and from school. School streets will not work everywhere. If this committee agrees to pursue this scheme, it does not mean imposing it on every school. A full assessment, including extensive local consultation, is vital before school streets are introduced by any specific school. But where we can introduce school streets, they will make an enormous positive difference to the lives of our school children. Thank you. If anybody's got any questions.
Janice, you've got your hand up.
Can I just ask there, who will be doing the consultation, or who do we think best should do the consultation?
I think, I don't know whether he's got that as a Q&A, but I would imagine it would have to be the council that would do this, because, I mean, they have got some funding to be able to pursue this. So I'm sure that we will get officers to actually do that.
Would that be hand in hand with the schools, because they might have a particular slant on issues that they might have with that school?
Yeah, I think we have to be aware that obviously one size does not fit all. So each school is going to be different in the experience that they have. I think it would have to be schools, and it would also have to be people who live around the area as well, because, you know, it does affect local residents. We have a lot of angst, let's say. It really is quite difficult in some areas where there's I wouldn't say violence, but you know, some residents have been quite angry. I get it. I'm sure other councillors get it, where they've been bombarded by people saying they're blocking me, I can't get out of my drive. They're double parked because they want to chat to one another through the window. They're keeping the engines running in the summer because they want the air conditioning, in the winter because they're cold. They get there half an hour earlier, so surely they could walk, but they sit there reading books. I'm sure we've all been there. So I think it has to be schools and residents that have to have that consultation.
Yeah. I'm fully supportive of it, I must admit.
Just on that, Karen, and I know Anthea had a hand up, I can't see it up now, but really we're looking at, this can be part of the scoping, which I think is going to be crucial. I mean, obviously we've had the presentation tonight. It's going on to the onto the work programme to look at. It's quite a big piece of work which cross-cuts, you know, all our scrutiny committees, you know, finance, communities, environment and health. Obviously it's been sent to children and young people. I think that's the right scrutiny committee for it to come to, but it involves all the scrutiny committees really. So we were looking at, and I don't know if Anthea wants to come in, perhaps having first having a scoping meeting and perhaps set up some form of workshop with committee, just a few committee members from each scrutiny committee. You know, I would suggest probably perhaps 2 from CYP, 1 from finance, 1 from communities, 1 for environment, just to make sure that we do get it right, that we cover all aspects of it, you know, because there is a lot there to take on board really, you know, in terms of, you know, the environment, you know, the legislation, everything. So I just want your views on how we, you know, whether you think that's a good idea on how we move forward, you know, rather than have all the massive questions tonight. I think we can discuss them. I think basically we would be in agreement, you know, to look at this as a CYP. I think if everyone's in agreement with that, I think that's really important that we get the agreement of the committee, that we look at this piece of work, that we have that scoping meeting and we have those workshops. It's going to take a little bit of time, I think, and also in terms of schools, just getting them on board in the appropriate time to get them on board. You know, they've got a lot of work on the plate at the moment, so it's that consultation with the schools. It's going to be really important. So Anthony, I'll bring you in because before everyone else, if that's okay.
Thank you. Thank you, Chair. I think you've covered most of it there, actually, Councillor Clemens. This is a piece of work that involves a number of service areas within the council, and therefore a number of the scrutiny committees as well. So I think the aim of this evening is really just to get it onto the agenda, get a decision from this committee as to whether or not it is something that you'd like to progress and look into, research and identify recommendations to take forward. And then if this committee is in agreement with that, I'd agree in an appropriate number of members from across the other committees who would be involved. And then it would be for officers to go away and try and plan a timetable, arrange a scoping meeting with the relevant members, and then agree a programme for, I would imagine, more than one workshop would be needed. So agree a programme for that, with the aim eventually to get to a consultation point with the relevant stakeholders, which would include schools, communities, town and parish councils, ward members, so that we can then make some meaningful recommendations as to whether or not to implement, and if there is an implementation, where, if there is a recommendation to implement, where that implementation should take place.
Yeah, thank you, Anthony. Because I think it's just really important to get it right, and obviously, if you can give that feedback to Councillor Janke, Karen. He couldn't be here tonight. I don't know if he's able to listen. I know he had another meeting, but we do want to get it right, and that scoping is really important. But if I can just have agreement from members first that they're happy for it to go ahead and that process to go ahead. Is everyone happy with that? Yeah. Okay. I'll take there's some hands up now. So sorry, Jane. Would you like to come in now? Apologies for bringing Anthea in.
Thanks, Chair. I'm actually glad that you said that, because I was sort of playing devil's advocate here, I suppose, because I think we can all agree that we all know schools where it would be very easy to implement. It wouldn't put anyone out or anything, but on the wider scheme, the through roads, the places we know that's going to be very difficult, it's a huge piece of work. a huge piece of work for the council in any case, because we've got highways there, and strategically, and this is the sort of point I was going to try and make. It's not so much a question, Karen, but especially in some of the new build areas, we're not very well off for ground width, so we can't build in drop-off points where we could have walk-in buses. It's actually a nightmare trying to get something set up to make it easier, make it safer. How that would work in some of those areas, you know, if they're not through roads, they're main roads, and there's no diversionary routes that people can sort of nip down, it's going to be very difficult. So it's going to be a huge amount of work for lots of our departments. So and behind that is going to be planning for the future. I mean, sometimes these are things you can't do straight away. And I think planning is definitely an issue that we need to pull that and tie that in together, particularly with the review of the local plan coming into place, because I think we're looking at enlarging the secondary schools, you know, and that type of thing. It is going to add issues to that when you've got more children, the borough's getting bigger, and we simply have no land to put anything on. So I think that also is going to be a big part of it. But other than that, no. Got a question. Sorry about that.
Yeah, no worries, Karen. Jane, thank you. Ian, you wanted to?
Yes, thank you, Chairman. Yeah, this is a really good idea, and I think we should look into it very carefully about implementing it. I looked at it and thinking at it for my own ward, and not only we got possible roads, but the schools are on the main road through the estate, which is also the bus route. So we'd need to talk to the bus services, because they will be interrupted if we're closing the roads, even for a short period of time. And the other thing that, whilst we're looking at it, is the implementation of where the parents will have to stop to drop and take their kids into the school. Like most of the schools in the area and the secondary schools, the parents come from a large catchment area. They're not local. They could be 30, 40, 50%, or even with secondary school, 80 or 90% are not local within walking distance. They have to use a car to get to the school, to get their children there, because the bus service is totally inadequate. I mean, it's not like London where you've got a good bus service and you've got the underground as well. So it's dead easy to use public transport. In Telford, public transport is not as useful as one would like it to be.
Yeah,
so we must look at that very, very carefully.
Yeah, and I think that's all part of the scope.
And there is one other thing, is that I'm glad we've got the cabinet member here. As Karen mentioned in her thing, we get parents arriving to pick up children in the afternoon an hour or so beforehand, and they sit there polluting the air with their cars running. That should also be dealt with, so that we can protect our children and not kill them off through pollution. Thank you, Chairman.
I think that can be all part of the scoping, but obviously thanks very much for that. As we can see, I think there's going to be lots of input into this, and it is a big piece of work for everyone. So thanks for that. So we're in agreement that the officers go away and work out a timetable. Is that right, Anthea? Then you come back to us and we set up the scoping meeting.
Yes, Chair. I think if we could just get an agreement as to the number, the optimum numbers. You did propose 2 from CYP and then 1 from each of the other committees. And if members are comfortable with that approach, and officers will put out a call as well for members members of the committees to volunteer. And then if we are oversubscribed, which I think we might be, because it's something that piques interest. Then at that point we would try to get a broad brush of a mix of gender, age, ward representation, so that it's fully representative, or as best as it can be representative of the borough.
Yeah, that's a good idea. Thanks, Anthea. That's really useful. Right, thanks, Karen, for giving that presentation. And if you can pass our comments tonight on to Councillor Janke, that would be really useful.
Thank you very much, Chair.
Yeah, okay, no problem. I don't know if officers, I know it's been probably a long day for you, and the next part, item number 7, is the work programme and Chair's update. So you're welcome to close now and go and have something to eat. And can I thank you for your attendance tonight? It's good to see you all.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Chair.
Thanks very much.
Good evening.
Good evening all.
Thank you. Good evening. Thank you.
Right, okay. All members here now still, yeah, great. Item number 8 is the work programme review, and there have been some updates to that. So Anthea, if you're able to sort of give us some feedback on those updates. Thank you.
Yes, thank you, Chair. It's item 7, and it's on page. It starts at page 9 of the agenda pack. Just that members of the wider members of this committee are aware, officers do look at this regularly to make sure that it's meaningful, and then we feed back to the chair in terms of proposals for timings. So that's what results in what comes before you at the committee. So the first item, as you can see, is the family safeguarding, the Hertfordshire model, which you've already had the initial briefing on this evening. You heard that the plan is for an implementation date of May. So the suggestion from officers is that there's an initial briefing in June, July, so that this committee can get an idea of early indicators as to how that model is progressing, and the early indicators of impact of that model, with then a 12-month follow-up once it's been in place for a year, so that you can get a full picture of what the impact has been. So that's the proposal for the family safeguarding item. There's an item, the next item is children with learning disabilities, and that's linked to children and young people with special educational needs, and meeting demand for EHCPs. We've touched on that this evening already in relation to the education item that came. The proposal is that will be there'll be an update to the committee in March to identify and explain the current offer and the work streams that are already ongoing in relation to that area of work. There is work going on at the moment. So the proposal is that probably Simon, I think, or Simon and some of his team will present to the committee exactly what the offer is and what work they're doing to try and improve and enhance that offering. Moving on to the next page, members are aware of the mental health provision for children and young people, and that this committee asked the health committee to lead on that. I won't say too much on that because I know the chair is going to update, give a wider update on the work around that. So that is ongoing. There is a proposal for a report to come back to this committee from the health committees, but I'll leave the chair to give you more detail. Then the care leavers covenant, we had originally planned for this to be early in the new year, but anticipating that the committee would want to progress the school streets item, which is, as we've already heard, going to be quite a complex and quite a large piece of work for the committee. Just on that point, the plan would be that we would, the workshop group, the working group would report back to this committee regularly so that you have an opportunity to feed into it and consider consider the proposals or consider the work that's been done and provide any feedback. So because that's going to be such a comprehensive piece of work, the proposal is that the care leavers covenant is reviewed following the school streets work, or at least once we've got the first chunk of that out of the way, so we can assess resources both of the committee and of officers. And then the next piece of work that was on the work programme is the belonging strategy, and the plan was that there would be a briefing to the committee on what the belonging strategy is, how it benefits children and young people, and importantly how it operates to minimise exclusions. There's only a few months left really of this municipal year, so the proposal is that that item is carried over into the next municipal year and added onto that work programme. And then the educational attainment, that is usually an annual report to this committee, but in light of COVID and the fact that it hasn't been a normal year, you haven't had an update. So the proposal is that there will be an update next municipal year when we've been able to better assess the educational attainment arising out of this year, and give an update to the committee on that one as well. And then the final item is your regular annual report from the local Safeguarding Children's Board, and that is still expected in February. So there's no proposed changes to that at the moment. And as far as I'm aware, that's on track. So hopefully that will come to the next meeting after it's been released in February.
Okay, thanks, Anthea. Is everyone happy with that work programme as it stands and the timetable?
Yes. Yeah.
Some meaty subjects there that we'll be looking at in the coming months. So everyone okay with that? That's lovely. Okay, item number 8, which is obviously my chair's update. And Anthea mentioned about the issue with regard to the joint HOSC and the review of children's mental health services in Shropshire and Telford and Wrekin. Just to let members know that myself and the Shropshire Council counterpart, Councillor Peggy Mullock, have been invited to take part in this review, as it falls within our respective scrutiny committee areas. I've attended 2 official joint HOSC meetings, the first in which Cathy Riley from Midlands Partnership NHS Foundation Trust attended to speak about BU, the Emotional Health and Wellbeing Service for Children in Shropshire, Telford and Wrekin, and their record on delivery of this service. The second meeting was with David Evans, the Accountability Officer for Shropshire, Telford and Wrekin Clinical Commissioning Group, on the commissioning arrangements in relation to children's mental health services at current and in the future. And I've also this week taken part in a workshop session which Telford and Pods and Shropshire PACS, that's a parent carer groups, along with some educational representatives, shared their experiences with navigating mental health support services for children. I have to say that was quite eye-opening, and it is actually good to listen to those people that are, that are actually involved in those services and are on the front line and receiving that services. And so between these there have been sort of numerous other meetings between myself and the joint HOSC co-chairs to assess what we've heard and influence the direction on the lines of inquiry. That's scoping again, which is really important. So looking to the future, there will be likely to be a 3rd meeting on children's mental health services and a report with recommendation for areas of improvement. And I'm hoping once that scoping is done to bring back something to CYP scrutiny that perhaps we can look at, a certain area that we can look at as well. But at the moment, there's an enormous amount of work going on with scoping of what needs to be done in terms of children's mental health. So Anthea, if you just wanted to.
It was really for any other business, Councillor McClemens. I was just getting in early. I was a little preemptive. Forgive me.
Okay. Okay. So is everyone happy with that? And I'll obviously keep reporting back, and whatever comes back needs to come back to CYP. I think you did get a link into one of the meetings that you could listen into. Jane first. Sorry, and then Janice. Apologies, Jane.
Yeah, I was just going to say, Chair, I listened to the one on the 19th of November, and I have to say, it was, I thought Derek did an absolutely stunning job of chairing that meeting, but listening to that, it was quite worrying that what we're being told is being delivered, or as usual, is on the face of it, on the ground, they weren't seeing that at all. It was quite a concern to hear, you know, in reality what is happening with that service, and the referrals actually, you know, not making the criteria, etc. Yeah, quite worrying. So it was a long meeting, that one was, but it was worth listening to.
All them long meetings, Jane.
Well, they all are, aren't they? But you know, it was really important, I think, that we hear that, because it does certainly give you a good background of what is going on. Well, not as we didn't know there may be something, but thanks for that.
Yeah, and obviously if there is any public meetings that we can send you the link, we will do, because I think it's important. Janice, you're next.
Obviously, thank you, Chair. Within the foster carers team and foster carers and the children, there's obviously a lot of mental health and trauma issues they go through there. Do you ever engage with the foster carers forum on these things?
Not as, I haven't as chair, to be honest. Perhaps that's something that we can look at.
Because I do know the chair of the foster carers forum, and I know they do very often feel out of things.
Okay, well, that's useful to know, actually. So yeah, we can make a note of that, Janice. Thanks. You know, anything that we, you know, that we can gain knowledge of, you know, and we need to listen to the people on the ground, don't we? That's what we, as you know, as Scrutiny should be doing more of. So, Lynn, you wanted to come in.
Yes, we were asked to put forward questions for you to ask at one of these meetings. Now, I don't know whether you did that, or that's sometime in the future, or if you've done it, what the feedback was.
There were sort of various questions, but there's been enormous amount of questions, as you can imagine, throughout. I'm just trying to look at how I do get that feedback from to yourselves. This is one of the questions I did ask of the HOS Scrutiny Committee, how myself as CYP Scrutiny Chair feeds back into my own Scrutiny Committee. So that is something that we are looking at. But I just wanted to give an overview tonight. But I will be speaking to Derek, who's the chair of the HOS, just on how we actually do that in terms of that feedback to the Telford and Wrekin CYP Scrutiny Committee. Thank you. Slots. Karen, you wanted to come in.
Yeah, actually, Jane, everyone steals my thunder. Yeah, it was very long, but it was very long. So, and also, I'm glad that Janice made that point, because I think Jane and I agree, having been on CYP for a number of years now, I've been off and on it now for 23 years. We did used to actually meet with foster carers. Do you remember, Jane? We did that an awful lot. And also people in the adoption, people who adopted children as well as obviously interview those young people who were adopted or fostered. So we did do all that, and I do agree that they felt it was really important that we speak to them, because they had like small things that they need to share with us, and they felt that they were left on a limb and no one was listening to them. So I do think, Janice, that was a great point that you raised, and it was a good practice that we did, but it's something that's sort of slipped by the wayside, and I do think that we should try and include them without them feeling that they're not being heard at all.
Yeah, I think it's really important to be inclusive. Obviously, I haven't been chair of this committee that long. I did go to the Young Carers sort of forum, and spent a couple of evenings with the young carers as well. And I think you just learn so much more, don't you, when you do meet these groups on their, not just in, this type of forum or at Addenbrooke. I think it's really important to get out there. That's always something I've sort of advocated, when I've been a scrutiny chair on any committee. So yeah, I would very, very much welcome that. So thanks for that suggestion, Janice, and Karen. I know officers will take that away from tonight's meeting. So Karen, you got your hand up again, or was that a...
Yeah. Sorry, it is. Yeah, I think it's really difficult because if I'm sure Jane and I remember we had two committees. So we had like the CYP, and then we had a spin-off from that. So the spin-off group was the one that mainly looked at more of that. So obviously it meant that there was more people to be able to do the work. So therefore, that's why we were able to do so much at that time. So, I mean, don't beat yourself up. That's what I'm trying to say.
No.
There was two committees. So there was a spin-off subgroup. So we were able to do those sort of things, meet the young people in care, meet the foster carers, investigate the any school attendance and so on and so forth. So, there was a lot more that we could do at the time with those two committees. So as I said, you can't spread yourself too thinly. But I do think it's important, and I'm really glad that Janice did mention that we don't want, that our foster carers are so important, and we do want to keep them on board and make them feel that they are valued in our communities. So, but as I said, you're doing a lot. You can't do everything. So
big work program there. So Anthea.
Yeah, it's just picking up some of those comments, Councillor McClemens. So I think what I'm really hearing is, yes, Councillor Tomlinson's right. We don't have the same committee structure that we did have, but perhaps what officers need to take away from this is that when there's a piece of work, we need to widen the stakeholder groups that perhaps we need to engage with, particularly to get some lived experience accounts, because you're quite right that the information that's come through in relation to through the health scrutiny committees in relation to children's mental health has been as you said, quite eye-opening in some respects. So I think for officers, our challenge is to identify those groups that we could really link into when we're doing a strategic piece of work. And I would send an invite to all members to come up with suggestions if there are any, because you know your wards, your communities, so we're always open to suggestions, definitely, and then we can make sure that feeds in, not just in this committee but across the other committees as well. One that I haven't heard mentioned is the Care Leavers Forum as well, which I know this committee has previously heard from the Care Leavers Forum around transition, experiences of transition, and experiences of being in care as well. So again, we can pick up those links. Something for this committee to know is that I will be recruiting some additional resource to support the scrutiny work in the new year. So it means that we will have a bit more availability in terms of trying to make those connections.
I know Karen's going to say that's really welcome, perhaps, as I am.
Probably that's what we did do as well, Jane, wasn't it? Yeah. So I think she's laughing here. We did do that. That's everything we did. We were looking at care leavers. We were looking at trying to encourage care leavers to still. There was some foster care families that wanted to still look after them, but then there was others that didn't. So when I went to university, as parents, we know that we support our young people to go to university, and we were one. Do you remember, Jane? We had one young person go to university. We were so excited. We thought it was absolutely fantastic, and I think that's something that we did do, and we're not doing, and it would be great if we continue to do that work that we did do all that time ago. And I know within on the ground, and I keep saying this, Angela, you can't do it all, but we did have this subgroup, and we did do a huge amount of work. with foster carers, care leavers, so on and so forth. And that's something that I think we need to still keep in touch. So Anthea, I'm really glad that you mentioned that, because that's again something that I don't feel that we are doing.
Yeah, it's welcome news anyway. Thank you, Anthea. Jane, just very quick.
Yes, very briefly. I don't want to harp on, but the one thing that stands out in my mind was a long, long time ago now, and Karen will bear me out on this one. One really important thing that stood out, we had a meeting with our children in care, and the one thing we made sure of is that they never were moved from a home with all their personal items thrown in a black bin bag, because that was the one thing they said to us that happened, and we said, no, this just can't go on. Just something, these simple things that they said to us, they make such a difference. And we said, no, this can't happen. You know, they've got to, you know, be treated like, well, I can't even, never mind, I'm filling up here a bit, but, you know, they've got to have a suitcase, they've got to have that dignity, you know, and it wasn't until you're talking face to face with them that you find this out. But I completely support everything that's Karen said. Those chats, those informal, I suppose, opportunities you get to speak to these youngsters as well, that really mattered. Not as we can do a great deal of that now, I know, but you know, there may have been more opportunities, but it's so vitally important that we do that. Thank you very much, Chair.
It's okay. Well, whenever we can, we will, you know, and if we got some more resources, hopefully we'll be able to do that more. Thank you. Obviously, report on the next February is our next meeting. Is that right, Kieran? You've got the... Okay, so Kieran will be in touch with the dates of the next meeting. I think there's an email gone to everyone. Could you just explain that? Because I've just been so busy this afternoon, I just saw it. So Kieran, if you could just explain that, so we can just see you. Yeah.
Happy to, Chair. The Local Government Ombudsman released a report recently in relation to children's they've collated essentially experiences that have been reported in via complaints to the Local Government Ombudsman in relation to children and young people's experiences with the local authority, particularly in the care sector. So there's been a report produced by the Local Government Ombudsman, which I asked to be circulated, and I believe that was circulated this afternoon. Just for some reading, so that you're aware of, so that you hear some of those first-hand accounts. Again, it's an eye-opening read in some respects. So I just asked for that to be circulated so that you can see that we are, you know, we are alert to these things and we do get the updates. And I think it's right that this committee gets those updates as well. Chair, if I could just ask for another couple of minutes, if that's all right. I know it's quite late, but it's just, again, to alert members to the fact that we'll soon be starting the work programming for the next municipal year. So do look out for the emails coming out, not only to you as committee members, but also to ward members as well. So if you can let your colleagues know, that would be really useful. It probably won't be before Christmas, but it'll be in the early new year. The contact will come out to start seeking items for the next year's work programme. Clearly, we've got some stuff that will be carried over that we've talked about this evening, and we've got some work that will be ongoing and continuing into the next year. So once we've collected all of the items and had all of the suggestions, we'll collate a list, and then we'll go through a process of identifying what we believe as officers are priorities. So we'll look at things like, are they strategic? Do they have a bearing on the direct community? And we'll try and prioritise them so that this committee can then consider them and decide, in order to get the best out of this committee, the best value, which items they really want to focus on in the next year. Yeah,
great. Thanks, Anthea. I can't see any hands up, so I think we'll bring the meeting to a close. Thank you everyone for your attendance, and just want to wish you happy Christmas and a restful time, and we're just hoping that 2021 is going to be a better one for us all. So perhaps, who knows, that we can meet in person.
Have a lovely Christmas, everybody.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Bye, everybody.
Bye, everybody.
Bye.